You are the first person in this conference. Please stay on the line.
Common Council meeting Tuesday, October 18th, 2022 at 6:30. Roll call. All aldermen and women are present with the exception of Mr. Newmeyer, which we will figure out where he is in a little bit. So please join with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so with that, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or concerns on the motion? All right, seeing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. We're going to move into mayor's business then. I've got just two quick things here. Want to thank Tony. Tony and I continue each week to visit, or each month to visit local businesses. This week we visited Bella's Salon up the road on Grand Avenue. Had a great conversation there with the owner and what he's looking forward to in Port Washington, so we'll thank him for that. And then also want to thank Alderwoman Postel and Alderman Sigwart for their continued work on the senior center conversations and creating a new community center and working with locally owned company to potentially put that together in the design conversations and moving forward to try to create a state-of-the-art 21st century very respectful place for our seniors here in the city of Port Washington. And then finally, the second thing I have under mayor's business is, Bob, if you could flip, or if you guys could flip to my computer there for me, please. So last 2 months ago, we had announced that, Bob, on my top, there should be two little buttons there. Nope. What'd you do here? So last spring, we had a middle school student from Thomas Jefferson reach out to me asking why the city of Port Washington did not have a city flag. And it was kind of a neat opportunity. We've got a lot going on in the city of Port Washington, obviously, but it was a really cool, positive distraction that he brought forward. So this young man, Ben, decided to send me an email, which I thought was pretty cool as a former high school and middle school social studies teacher, for him to reach out all on his own and shot me an email and sent me an image of what he thought the city flag could look like. So we took that idea and put out a poll the last couple of weeks, and we had 4 finalists that we put forward to the community. And thanks to Chris from the Ozaki Press for putting it in the paper. So we had Dan, Nick, Stacy, and Ben with their different pieces. And we put the poll out there, and it was pretty neat. It went on multiple Facebook pages, and 244 people participated in that poll, which is more than we get for most things. Unless there's a new development, then we get a lot of people engaged, which is good. So we can hear and move forward. But at the end of the day here, 244 people participated in the poll, and the results were pretty clear. Our friend Ben, the middle school student who's now an 8th grader's design, was the 58% first choice of the community, and 46% was the second choice. Pretty clear runaway piece for Ben. So we took Ben's design, and then we sent it to a graphic artist with a expectation or an idea so that we could move it out there. So this is what Ben had submitted, hand-drawn. And I learned that Ben is a pretty cool kid. He really likes flags. He's into the symbolism and the different components of the flags. So he submitted this, and then we talked about it, and we shared it over. And our process was that we sent it to a Port Washington native who's a graphic artist, and asked them to transfer Ben's ideas into a digital format, shifting the lighthouse from black to white to be representative of our White House. we've contacted a Wisconsin flag company manufacturer from Waukesha, and we're working with Locally Inspired, a locally owned business, who is going to order those flags if the council approves it tonight, so that they are here for the holidays. And then the graphic art file will be available to all local vendors to kind of do with what they want to. So at the end of the day, we'll be able to purchase those for all of our public buildings. And what I think is pretty neat is we'll put the history and the symbolism of the flag on our city website if it's approved tonight. And then we're going to make sure that Ben gets one. So the final design that it looks like will be this. And Ben, I'm going to ask the council for a motion or a conversation on the flag, but that will be the City of Port Washington's flag from now forward if that is approved. And I'm just really proud that one of our students here in Port Washington took the civic responsibility to kind of advocate for himself. You don't have a lot of 12 and 13-year-olds who reach out to the mayor. As a matter of fact, it never happens. Even the ones I have at home don't talk to me. So it was pretty awesome that you had done this, Ben. So if there aren't any other questions, or if there's any questions or comments from council, otherwise I'd be looking for a motion to approve Ben's design and make that the official flag of the City of Port Washington.
Outstanding job, Ben. I will move to approve. Well done.
I'll second.
Any questions or conversation? All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Motion passes. Ben, come on up here. Ben, all these people are actually here for the flag. As soon as you're done, you guys can all go. No, but Ben, do you want to say anything to us or the council? But like, what made you think about it? What was your idea?
I just sort of, the idea just came to my mind. I didn't really put it too hard into my idea and just put it on paper, and it came out great.
Yeah. Are you pretty happy with that?
Yes, I'm very happy.
I mean, here's the thing as a social studies teacher and then someone active in government, like, you will, for the rest of your life, get to see that flag. You'll be an ad someday and you'll be like, hey, you see the flag? It's a good job. And Ben's mom and dad, I just want to thank you for raising a great little guy over there. That's pretty cool. And again, his courage. And please make sure to also, I had sent a note to his teachers last year. I thought that was phenomenal that he did that. So Ben, when I was your age, we used to come down here for tours of City Hall. And there was a mayor, when I was mayor, his name was Frank Lampert. And when we would go into Mr. Lampert's office in the back there, Mr. Lampert would always tell us the same thing, which is that as a citizen of your own community, you owe it to your community to serve your community. So maybe one day you should run for one of these seats up here and have that flag right in front of you. It's a good job, Ben. Okay, so with that, in your packet was included some of the officers and staff reports. And moving into the next item tonight, so I know a lot of you are here this evening to talk about the potential development in the city of Port Washington. Reminder to you that you have 3 minutes to speak. I'll set a timer. When it beeps off, I would ask that you respect that so that everyone in the community who would like to speak can get their voice heard tonight. And if you have comments that are beyond that 3 minutes, please make sure to submit those in writing to us as a council. We will take those into consideration moving forward. Also, as a reminder, the council and nor I can respond to any questions or comments that you may have for us in the meeting unless they are posted for comment from us. Okay? So with that, when you come up, please step up to the podium and the microphone, state your name and your address in the city, and then you've got 3 minutes. So who would ever like to go first? You got to flip. There you go. Now it's on.
Better? I'm Barrett Genson. Those that don't know me, I'm a former architect in town here and left to my city I love to take a job with a university in Florida. So I feel like I've got some reasonably good background. I'm not against change. regarding city projects, but not at the expense of failing to fully investigate the proposed changes, carefully over an extended period of time and thoroughly evaluating the cost benefit of those changes, gaining the approval of the majority of citizens in the community. Did I tell you I'm a dreamer? Okay. To be honest, as an architect and director of facilities planning, I don't trust developers. I know that's a prejudice, but I've been burned, both here locally and in Florida, because of some misdeeds the developers partake. I view life as a trade-off. Can a quaint lakeside community retain its charm without giving into the extensive build-out of condos in the downtown? It may be too late already. I'm here to listen. I was at one of the developers' meetings on October 5th. I found the information she provided was very insufficient and incomplete, so I'm hoping for a better result in listening tonight. Why raise City Hall as part of your development? Would this project be TIF funded? Don't know. How would the TIF meet the qualification of being a blighted facility? What approvals from the county have been granted? It seems like there's things going on behind the scenes which I don't like. I think we need to have more open government. Trust the people. Trust the people representing you that they're going to do the right thing, but verify. One of the architects on the police building, I also resent the mayor's comment that perhaps the police building was outdated. That was 27 years ago, and dealing with then Mark Grams, Chief Ed Rudolph, and Mike Keller, that building was thoroughly vetted, and it should last at least 50 years. I am surprised that you're looking at tearing it down, probably for more condos to be created. I really have so many questions, but I think perhaps I'm going to wait with the rest of my questions until Thursday night at the Plan Commission meeting, because it gets into particulars, and I know you can't comment back to me. Just leave it be that I'm not against the project, or projects, plural. I just want to make sure they're thoroughly vetted and that they're the right thing to do in terms of a cost-benefit basis for the city of Port Washington. I would hope the city would slow down and take more time and thoroughly vet the project as planned. I look forward to the comments from the developer tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for the community's awareness, this is not coming in front of the Planning Commission this Thursday. It will be coming to the Planning Commission in November.
Oh, that's
All right, other comments? Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Bert Babcock, and I've been a resident of. Is that good now? I am disappointed to see another pending development that does not have as its backbone the things that make Port Washington a great place to live. Historically, Port has been like a small New England fishing village with small-scale housing, its main street, marina, and many beautiful views of the lake. This has been possible because our community leaders have been thoughtful in preventing a saturation of the city with large national chain restaurants and other large businesses that drive local businesses out of business. The design of this development does not show the character or uniqueness of Port Washington. It only provides large-scale buildings to generate revenue to cover the cost of construction and line the pockets of a developer. The result is the destruction of the charm of Port Washington and the views of Lake Michigan, which have been the lifeblood of the community in years past. In addition to this, it is difficult to comprehend that the city has thrown in City Hall and city land for this development. It would seem to me that the residents of Port Washington, if this is going to be done, there would be a solicitation for other developers making them aware that Port Washington is willing to give up prime downtown land as a part of the development to get the best deal for the taxpayer. To me, the proposed plans appear more to Highway 33 drop off to get some fast food as opposed to the heart of the downtown. We have a 31-foot height limit bordering Grand and Milwaukee streets. And that, to me, the scale of these buildings are too big for this city. So I'm hoping that 31-foot height is followed. The cities. So I guess in conclusion, I do think that if the city's going to give up this prime downtown land, we should get solicitation from other developers to see what their proposal would be for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Babcock. Other comments? You can go.
I'm having my wife Lori pass out a sheet to the aldermen and to anybody tied up with the council. Should get you one. The items on that sheet are questions and, oh, okay. Thank you, John Siegler. I'm Don Cosentine. I live at 518 Brentwood Court. I've lived in Port Washington for almost 40, maybe 50 years. Anyways, I'm too old to remember. But passing out this sheet, I would like council members at least think of these items. I don't want to go through all these because I only have 3 minutes here. But I would like to point out, it's fun going to an automobile agency and looking at a big heavy truck because, speaking for myself, they're cool. Somebody comes up to us and gives us a bunch of pictures with dog tracks on the top of buildings and what else? There's the buzzword for new construction, and it looks really exciting. Is the project too big for Port Washington? Port Washington is very small. We're not like Sheboygan, where there is more land around the water there. Our waterfront is very small. And what it is, Barrett Jensen pointed out here, we're losing the character of Port Washington. We have individual houses. The houses pictured in the proposal look like they're all one pitch roof. We have subdivisions already. They have houses that are always one pitch roof. I like the individual small contractors coming in and doing projects for smaller people instead of large developments. So if I were to go down the list, I would just like to point out a couple items that I think are very important. The first item I have on my list is that Port Washington is getting tired of all the construction downtown. Give us a rest. Let us go through our town and enjoy it. We got trucks all over the place. We allow the contractors to spread all their stuff all over. That should stop. We're tired of sewers being torn up. Let's give it a rest. And what is the hurry? Right now, times are uncertain. We don't know what the economy is. And buying a loaf of bread, have you noticed how high it's gone? It's almost $5 a loaf. And the project has all these buzzwords. Okay, so I took care of that as far as, so watch the timing on this. There's no hurry. Then the affordability liability. A project of this size would require somebody from the city to supervise it. If Caterpillar came in here to build a plant, they would have a project manager from the Caterpillar company. We need a project manager from the city to make sure the project is coming in on time and give us maybe monthly or quarterly reports on their progress. Are they running into problems? Do they need more TIF money? It seems like we've gone through that kind of stuff. That's when a developer is irresponsible when they come back and say, oh, we didn't find this. Well, you can look in the ground once in a while. And here, those buildings are public buildings. Port Washington owns a lot of those projects there.
Mr.
You as
Cosentine,
alderman-
Mr. Cosentine, thank you very much. You've
Okay.
exceeded your 3 minutes, so
right.
we appreciate.
Thank
No,
you.
I don't want to cut you off. I appreciate it very much. We have your pieces here. I just want to make sure everybody gets their points. I'll meet you in the middle of the circle. Thank you. Jason.
Jason Whittick, 140 East Woodruff Street. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Common Council. As most of you know, I currently serve the City of Port Washington as the Chair of the Board of Public Works, an advisor to the Community Development Authority, and most recently now a member of the Downtown Plan Committee. My comments tonight are in regards to the proposed Ozaki Square development as presented in the agenda packet for tonight's meeting. I've been doing this long enough that I'd rather be something for something than against something. But in this case, I do not support the Ozaki Square concept as currently conceived. I am strongly in favor of preserving the current City Hall building as well as the old Ozaki Theater building where the Java Dock is currently located. Both of these buildings contribute to our civic and cultural identity, past and present. I cannot support the wholesale demolition of properties on one side of a block for the promise of something new, no matter the assessed value. Most people, when you ask them what makes Port Washington great, they may say something like the pavers on Franklin Street or the view of Lake Michigan. Those things are great and have value, but they are additive. What makes downtown Port Washington great is the collage of buildings found on 260-foot by 360-foot blocks, all laid out within the original plat. That when you walk down most streets downtown, every 16 to 24 feet or so, you have a different building, a different architectural style, a different retailer service. It is the sum of those individual buildings and the people within them that create great places. The form of these buildings, not the architecture, is what matters in creating places worth caring about. So I'm not an obstructionist by any means. I've wholeheartedly supported all 5 major developments downtown in the last 10 years. What made each one of those projects great is that they were incremental, filled in a gap in our urban fabric. Each building from Harbor Lights, Lake Harbor Lofts, Lake Point, Newport Shores, and soon Inventors Brewpub had a different architect, a different style, a different perspective, and ultimately were sensitive to the context of their surroundings. They worked within the downtown and did not impose themselves on the downtown. I believe the Ozaki Square development is too heavy-handed and too imposing on the fabric of downtown, attempting to create place in a downtown where place already exists. So this week I spent a couple hours in the Port Washington Historical Society's Resource Center reviewing the archival documents for both City Hall and the Ozaki Theater. It's a great exercise to partake in if you ever have time. As many of you know, prior to the City Hall being built in 1958, there was an opera house built on the late 1800s where vaudeville shows, city basketball games, and youth boxing tournaments took place. But just as importantly, where city government conducted its business prior to our current City Hall. This site has been a prominent civic site in this city for at least 150 years, right here at the corner of Grand and Wisconsin. You cannot demolish this building or vacate these premises without additional thought and more care. A standalone City Hall on a prominent site is at minimum required for a city like Port Washington to conduct its business, not confined with a residential building wrapped around a parking structure. The city for a handful of years supported the Blues Factory concept of the North Slip, a place that was to celebrate not only roots music recorded in Ozaki County, but celebrate the transition from live entertainment to mass media production. In the Ozaki Theater building, the Java Dock, we have the living embodiment of just that kind of transition in our society, from live entertainment and vaudeville to a movie house. While no longer a movie house, it has proved its sustainability and worth as a thriving and well-maintained building coffee shop. We won't get that history back in return if it is demolished. Why create a founder's walk to celebrate our history when we'd be knocking down our own living history? One second. Besides preserving at least these 2 buildings, I strongly recommend the council empower and fund the Downtown Plan Committee to include the Ozaki Square parcels in the downtown plans and facilitate additional planning. The integrity of the downtown plan depends on it. More importantly, one second. Additionally,
I'm going to ask that you just give us your written comments there.
one last
I need to
comment.
be respectful to everybody else. So I know you need, I give you one more
Well, as the
second.
chair of Board of the Public Works, can I have one more second? Additionally, I request the city government, if they believe there's limitations on the current buildings and needs and modifications, to empower Plan Commission, the Board of Public Works, to survey and study those things. I think the question of vacating and demolishing City Hall cannot be answered in a month's time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to ask everyone else, please respect when that alarm goes off, just to ensure you can all get the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Jason. Other public comments?
My name is Jerry Berkowitz. I live on Grand Avenue, right across the street from the library. I don't know if I'm in favor or against. It would depend upon the answers of 3 questions that I would have, which you can't answer tonight. How would this affect traffic patterns? How would it affect taxation if we have to move City Hall? And how will the businesses that have to move react to the proposal? Then I would just have a wish list. I would much rather be standing here tonight if you were discussing creating, like in Cedarburg, a cultural center where you can have music, art, theater, rather than something like that. Just to put the idea in the heads of people here, perhaps that would be a great project and a great, a tremendous addition to Port Washington. It is in Cedarburg. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments?
Stephanie Hackey. I have a house at 511 North Wisconsin Street. I don't have any formal words prepared, but as I've been reading about this, one of the things that is struck in my mind so much is, I think Mr. Gensen had said, transparency. I do, for my professional job, organizational change management. So I understand change is very hard. A couple comments I would say is transparency is essential. It appears, and perception is sometimes reality, that there is not 100% transparency when things are going through. I've been a member of a planning commission in the 8th largest state in Minnesota, so I understand the process. I think transparency of having side discussions, not to have a quorum, is interesting, for sure. I don't completely understand the process behind that. The Planning Commission is an important step in the whole development process, and rushing through it, you need to create awareness and bring people along. And one of the things that, as I've been reading and looking at things, that I did write a comment down on was about benefits, right? And as a public servant myself, one of the things is you are all here to serve your constituents, correct? They elected you, you are to look out for their best interest, right? And not the best interest of a developer. I don't know if this is completely the right or wrong reason, right? More information, it's in the conceptual phase, right? But what I do know is anytime you rush something where there's an appearance of lack of transparency, people are not gonna like it and they're not gonna get on board with it. So I encourage that. I think going and not doing, 8-story buildings in downtown, that's a little bit ridiculous. It's a quaint town. I've bought 2 homes in this town because I love this town. I grew up in this town. My father was a public servant in this town. So one of the things that I would challenge and I would like to hear from the council is how this is going to benefit an everyday citizen of Port Washington. I haven't heard how this is going to benefit. I hear about benefits of all the downtown development, right? Whether I agree with them or don't, that doesn't necessarily always matter. But you need to tell people how me, as a day-to-day tax-paying citizen of the city, is going to get the benefit, and how it's not going to benefit just the developer. correct? So that would be my advice, to bring people along on the change and understanding, transparency, have this go through the Planning Commission, have it go through the proper channels and not have it appear. And I also, one other question I would have is talking about the average median income in Port Washington is $78,939. I read that this is going to be affordable housing that they want to build. The median rent in this town is $923. What is the definition of median affordable housing for this development? And also, what would the average rent be? Is this something that is, have we vetted this? Is this even affordable? Are people going to be able to come in? So if I could leave you with one thing, transparency.
Thank you, Steph.
Yep.
Good evening. My name is Pat Morrissey. I live at 120 West Dodge in Port Washington. I'm here tonight to speak to the housing portion of the proposed Ozaukee County Square. Having worked with homelessness and the need for more affordable housing for our own Port Washington residents, I'm aware that Port has very inadequate housing for our lower and middle income families. According to the Sewer PAC report, which was presented to this Common Council last year, Port's cost for renters is prohibitive for our current workforce. In fact, it was cited that there's a shortage of low to moderate cost housing for the city of Port Washington compared to the moderate wage jobs. We also have people who are technically homeless and at the moment are being housed at Family Promise. These people can only stay there for 30 days. Where do they go and their families when they leave the shelter? The children in these families are part of the Port Saukville School District and have close classmates and friends in the city. But with the lack of affordable housing and Section 8 housing, there's nothing that we can offer these families and their children. This is adding trauma to trauma. Workers in this group cannot afford the private market housing in this area. Affordable housing requires partnerships and public investment to ensure that our local workers can find and live in housing that will not be flipped for profit. These are the workers needed to keep our businesses open. Constructing real affordable housing will support our economic vitality, bring more jobs, and ensure Port Washington residents can continue to live, work, and recreate in their own city. The Ozaukee County Square seems to be proposing studio 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. Will any of these units be Section 8 housing? Will these default to high-paying rents and once again shut out those who are truly in need of affordable housing? The construction of this square will require a lot of money. Do the majority of citizens really buy into this? Has each Common Council member met with their constituents to gather their input? Or are we going to just be told that this will pass without our feedback? Often it feels when speaking at these meetings that our words are not being heard, let alone being discussed with our alderperson. If you believe in representational government, please assure that this decision is made with input from our citizens. TIF money should not be used for this project. The designated area is not an economically deprived one, of which the purpose is of TIF. And bottom line, if there were to be a creation of a new TIF district, this should require approval by a referendum of the voters. In closing, all citizens in the city should have a say through their alderperson or a referendum regarding Ozaukee County Square. Let's make sure that this money is truly being used to help those who really need it, not just adding to an already lucrative downtown area. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Other comments?
Hello, my name is Brenda Shoup. I've lived in Port Washington for 35 years, 32 of those years on Parkview Lane, and the last 3 years on Washington Avenue. I just want to say, slow your roll. We have something in Port that no one has in Ozaukee County. We have a viable downtown lakefront community. That's something you can't buy, you can't make, you can't change. So let us really take our time and see what we want to do with that. I think now that we are open to have development, we're going to have people coming out of the woodwork that want to develop our country, our city. It is a great city to live in. It's a great city to raise a family in. People want to live here. And if we will do this right, it will be great for future generations. I also want to say one thing. I went into the archives of the city council minutes from the last year. Nowhere was it mentioned that there's anything wrong with City Hall. City Hall is a perfectly viable building. I've seen a lot of problems with the library, but nothing about City Hall that we would consider to sell a viable building and not have another option of what we are going to do for that is just irresponsible as far as I'm concerned. So I want to say in closing, let us be really careful. We can only do this once. Let's do it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is Rick Nelson, 1432 Norridge Trail. I had the opportunity to go to one of the developers' public meetings that she had, one of the three, and I appreciated the opportunity to ask her questions about the project. I guess I'm quite impressed that she has generated this much interest, that we would have a room full of concerned citizens. I think that's great. And quite frankly, I think her thought in this process is terrific. I'm not sure that we all are going to agree on everything, but I think we've got to take a step back and give her a chance to either prove it or we have to disprove what she's thinking about. Like Pat mentioned, I don't think this should be a TIF project. However, I look at all the TIF projects we have, and anytime you can build right on our waterfront and get TIF, to me, that ship has already sailed. So as much as I don't think TIF should be used, we've been doing it, and I'm not going to discourage. So again, I think everybody should step back, take a look at what's being offered, and if you have comments, talk to the developer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Other public comments? Oh, Joe. Joe's back. Hey.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm very good, Joe. Welcome back, buddy.
So my name is Joe Burke. I live over on 516 West Michigan Street. So I just want to speak to the affordable housing part of this project. So about probably 6 months ago, moved out to Park City, Utah. Was looking for housing out there. There's no affordable housing, none whatsoever. And that's frustrating to me as an employee of a ski resort out there. Finding affordable housing should be no problem for workers out there. Then I moved out to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Same issue. No affordable housing whatsoever. Housing was going from, rent was going from probably like $1,500 a month to $4,500 a month. Making $18 to $20 an hour, that's not going to cut it. If you're going to have more expensive housing, you're going to have to pay more. That's going to put a strain on businesses. And how are the businesses going to survive in downtown Port paying more money? It's got to be affordable. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Welcome home. Any other public comments? Mrs. Didier.
Mayor and council, thank you for having us here tonight. I've lived in Port Washington for 75 years. I worked at the city of Port Washington for almost 30 years. And I can't believe the power that the aldermen have in the city. And they've done many great things. I'm just concerned about the speediness and how this is going so fast. We don't even know all the answers to questions, and it's just going before the council, before the plan commission. I think we should just slow down and get all the facts. But I want to also tell the aldermen and alderwoman who's done a fine job that so many of us are concerned about the results from the Blues Factory and how the wishes of the people weren't taken into consideration, and how so many of us worked to try to stall that project, and it did not work. Working at the city, I felt City Hall was a great place to work. We had what we needed, and we remodeled about 20 years ago, and it was a good remodel, and we all worked well with the remodeling project. I'm also concerned that the city has to update the water, wastewater, and we certainly need a firehouse. And one of my major concerns is the EMTs for the ambulance. I've had friends, neighbors call and waited many, many minutes before, in fact, our next door neighbor waited 20 minutes before an ambulance arrived. This could be a life or death situation. I think that we should address that. That would be one of my major concerns also. Their salaries have to be equal to surrounding communities so they don't just stay here a short time and then go to another village or city. I just want to tell the aldermen that I hope they take the time to consider all the options. We should be worried more about development outside of the downtown area. What about more residential areas? Or trying to get in little factories or some thing like that would be more improvement for the city. So I also want to remember those words that I read. Just remember, if the people don't want it, we won't do it. So let's remember those words and proceed with caution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Didier. Other public comments? Mr. Schiller?
Hello there. I'm Paul Schiller, live at 277 Nautica Drive and a longtime resident. There's a lot to unpack here, and I'll start by disclosing my bias. I'm in the process of building a house on Milwaukee Street, so this would have an impact to our views. But this is not about our views. Nobody gives a rat's ass about my view. And nobody should, but they should care about being able to see what's going on in town and being able to see into the hills and what the town really looks like. You see communities that have been developed along rivers and how cool it looks when you terrace in your development. So just a thought, and it's certainly not about my view, but I've had this same height view with other developments in the past. I wonder a bit about priorities. I've heard sewer and water and police and fire stations as higher priorities, and if you read the paper and put numbers on that, that's probably $50 million worth of things. Pick a number, 40, 60, I don't care, it's a lot of money. And I've presented that to some of the people that are sitting up front here today and got the responses, Paul, that's exactly why we should do this project, because we need the revenue. That is massively scary to me, that it comes down to the revenue side, not the aesthetics of what this community is and can be going forward. So I worry about blinders from that perspective. And then you have to look at what happens after this project. If we use TIF funding, if we have infrastructure development, if we have to pay for a library and a city hall where that wasn't even on the priority list, really, from my perspective, from what I've been hearing, what are you left with? Marginal financial gain, a library that would have to be redeveloped, and a police and fire station that's probably worth less if you wall it off, considering it's already walled off to the north and to the west by hills. So That doesn't sound like a great trade-off to me, so I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the comment on workers and being able to have workers downtown. I think that's a broader economic issue that needs to be dealt with at different levels. I'm concerned about the speed. I have all these concerns. Yet, I talked to Schaefer Development, to Cindy Schaefer, and she said something to me that resonated. And she didn't use these words because I don't want to call her the devil. But she said, maybe it's better to deal with the devil you know than the one you don't. So there is something to that, but I'm in favor of well thought out, more conducive to Port Washington, more inclusive, possibly terrace development, or somehow limited in height, again, with some bias that I have. I look forward to us not jumping at the first shiny object that comes along, and I look forward to a downtown with character and projects that really solve our long-term problems. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Other comments? Other comments?
Hello, my name is Shane Schmutzler. I live in town here, been here for quite a while, up on Patrick Court. I wasn't planning on, saying anything today, but after hearing the comments, it seemed everybody I think here seems to be sort of on the same page. It seems to me that this town has a real penchant for knocking things down, putting new looking things up. And I think we probably should take it a little slower and maybe think about it. We have a high school up here that they knocked down what was Building 1, beautiful Gothic architecture. There's high schools in this country that celebrate that type of thing, and we just said, well, it doesn't really fit our needs and knocked it down. Not something you can really replace. I hate to see we have a nice library down here. Does it need some remodeling? Maybe. But as so many people have mentioned, there are different parts of the city. It doesn't all look the same. And there's a reason for that. It's a kind of a classic looking building. There's other buildings in town that are classic looking. Do we want to tear them all down just to put up something new and shiny? And I don't know if anybody's talked about knocking the library down, but we have things in town that are different looking and are unique and add to the style and the character of town. And I hate to see us just knock it down because there's something new and shiny we can put up. We think is newer and better. I don't think anybody would be in favor of knocking down the lighthouse because, hey, we can put up a new one. It looks nicer. It's cooler. It meets the new current style. I don't think anybody would go for that. I hate to see us do that to other parts of the city without some real thought. I travel a bit for business here and there and get around, and I can tell you, it's amazing how many towns are starting to look identical. Out in Idaho, Utah, Colorado, various places, it's amazing. The architecture, it does all start to look, a lot of places I've been, starting to look like Denver. A lot of the buildings that were in the proposal for when we had the meeting a month ago or so, where they had all the different pictures up here of the proposal, so many of those buildings look just like buildings in other towns. I really think we need to be aware of what we're doing and try to keep the charm that we have here before you knock it down and look like everybody else in the country. I think cost, as it's been brought up, is another thing to keep in mind. And I, like so many other people here tonight, think probably a good time to slow down and think. I don't know what the rush is. I know you guys have a schedule. You want to do stuff by the end of the year and various things, but I don't know what the rush is. This all seems to be going awfully fast. I think a little bit more thought and public input might be a good thing to take into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments? Other public comments?
Hi, my name's Jamie. I live on 316 North Spring. I wasn't going to speak, and I'm really bad at this. I'm sorry, but I'm a little person.
Jamie, I'm sorry. What was your last name?
Last.
Thank you.
I'm a little person, so I'm just a small business owner. I'm actually in the Javadoc building, and to lose that spot means I would probably lose my business. This is my means of paying for my children's sports at Port Hoops, paying for scouts, paying for everything, because this is my side business and the only way that I can work with being home and that. So taking that away from someone like me, and I'm not just talking about me, but other businesses in that building also. I know you have North Shore Hair Design, you have Aaron Skincare. we're just little people and we're affected greatly by something like this. This is going to tear us down, and some of us can't rebuild. Some of us can't find another place that's like that place. And so that just greatly affects us in that aspect. Also, I'm definitely not in favor of a five-story building. I'm a veteran. I served out in Fort Lewis, Washington, where we had workforce housing for the military, which brought in crime, drugs, and everything else in that whole development. And I'm afraid of that happening here. I came back home to raise my kids here because of this community, because of our downtown, because of what we had here. And I'm so scared of losing that, of losing something so special that my parents came here for, my grandparents came here for. I'm third generation. My husband and I both graduates here. My parents are graduates here. I don't want to see my kids lose out on such a history and such a small, quaint, special little town because people want to line their pockets. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. That just died. Other public comments? Excellent.
My name is Corey Garrett. I'm at 346 South Garfield. I am a transplant here. I've only been here for 2 or 3 years. And I just have a few questions from like an understanding side because I don't have the emotional attachment. But it's more of I lived in Sheboygan for a while, and when I first moved there, I had 3 options of housing. And even then, it was hard to get housing. And then besides those 3, it was really expensive, like $2,000, and that's kind of an issue, especially with mental health in this community, especially Ozaukee County. I know people have done research on it. Affordable housing is one of the biggest issues. So there's that part of it, but also the fact of being able to get the information to average people. I've never attended one of these before, and I'm not from the area, so it's also harder to get that information. And a lot of information is disseminated through people that you know, which takes time. And so, like as many people mentioned, rushing it is kind of an interesting option. I'm not against it. I just don't know about it because I literally heard about it 2 weeks ago. So being able to have the average person to get the information easily, especially since this is something that's going to impact a lot of the community, would be very helpful. And as mentioned before, affordability, not only for the housing, but they did mention commercial space. Is that something where someone that was in the building that JavaDoc is and other businesses, would they be able to afford going to there? Is that like an equal change? And also understanding is the land that is being built, is that going to be private, public? Is it only going to be private? Like understanding the functionality of that. Working in Madison for a while, there's a lot of those private publics and there was some benefit to it, but there's also drawbacks of each. And then there's the public parking. Is that something that's going to be free, or is it something that's going to be public but you have to pay passes for? Things like that. And just the infrastructure, will we be able to sustain it? Because I have heard this area has some of the higher costs for water and treatments and things like that. And is that something that's going to be raised because we need to create more facilities? So a lot of it is just the affordability. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to Port.
Thank you.
Other questions? Or, excuse me, other comments? Other public comments? Okay, then we're going to move into the agenda this evening. I just want to thank all of you for coming tonight, and I'm very excited that you all attended. I also appreciate the comments and the time that you took to put your thoughts together. Tonight, we heard a lot of things, a lot of questions from you. This is the first time the council's seen whatever the final proposal will be, or ideas. This is Schaefer Development's first opportunity to go public with it and share all that with us. So the fact that you guys did your time and ideas, we really, really appreciate. And I think when that conversation's held, a lot of the concerns that you have, I hope, will be alleviated, because there's never been an offer to sell City Hall. These are other people's ideas they're bringing to us, and this is the first time we will hear it. The other thing is I really also appreciate the fact that you had the courage to speak. And if you choose, we would ask that you communicate with us. I received 2 phone calls and 1 email about this topic before tonight. 2 of the people who called me are here tonight, so I'm grateful for that. And 1 email in favor. So please make sure to email us and talk to us so that we know those pieces. While you assume that we use the Ozaukee Press for your perspectives, we do not. We listen to you, and that is one person's perspective. So please make sure to reach out to us because we appreciate that. All right, so with that, we're going to go into agenda item number 7A, 1, consideration and possible action to relocate water utility capital improvement program funds to purchase one fixed base meter reading station. The issue is the the consideration of that, and the staff recommends approving the transfer of $66,000 from the 2022 water utility CIP budget of $130,000 currently designated for the purchase of new automatic read meters for the purchase of a fixed base meter reading base station antenna software and training from Census, Core, and Maine. Rob.
Okay, this item has been brought to the Board of Public Works and Finance Committee, both of which have recommended approval. This is the transfer of $66,000 that had been designated for the purchase of additional radio read meters. We have not been able to purchase radio read meters this year because they are not available on the market. So we have pivoted and would like to designate those funds towards the purchase of the antenna system. That will be a central reading location for the radio read meters. And after 2022, we're hoping that in 2023, we can go back to buying the meters and fully implement the automated system in the next 3 years. And so again, that's a recommendation from Board of Public Works and the Finance Committee. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or concerns? Otherwise, I'd be looking for a motion.
So moved.
There's a motion, Alderman Gasper. Is there a second? Second by Alderman Tierney. Any questions or concerns on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Moves into 7A2, consideration and possible action to execute an agreement with Census to provide, install, and maintain an automatic metering infrastructure system, including related equipment and software. The staff recommendation is the city execute an agreement with Census to provide, install, and maintain an automatic metering infrastructure system, included related equipment and software. Rob.
Yep. So this has also been recommended by the Board of Public Works and the Finance Committee for approval. These are, again, these are census meters that are out in our system collecting the information, and we'll be transmitting that data to the antenna system, which of course is also manufactured by Census. Their local distributor is Core and Maine, who will perform the labor and supply the materials to do the work, and so we recommend approval of the contract with Census.
All right. Any questions or concerns? Mr. Sigwart.
This is like a 12-page contract, Rob. Has the city attorney reviewed it?
He has.
Mr. Mayor, may I respond further? Thank you. Thank you. I have reviewed it.
3 minutes.
All right. I'll try 30 seconds. I've reviewed it, and it's extensive, and as far as it goes, I don't have a problem with it. The concern that I have is that Census provides the devices and the software, and they warrant that. That's fine. But Core and Maine is their selected contractor to install it. And the Census contract expressly disclaims any warranty for installation. And it's my understanding, Rob, although I'll invite you to correct me if I'm in error, that Core and Maine does not have an installation warranty either. So that is a concern of mine. If the equipment and devices are installed on day 1 and on day 2 or day 30 they break or fail, as far as I'm concerned right now, there's no recourse for the city. And that's concerning to me. So I've also seen a reference in a recent email to a 5-year extended warranty on installation, but nor have I seen that. So I do have concerns at this moment. Thank you.
Sure. So we can have two options. I'm confident we can obtain the warranty from Core and Maine because we work with them all the time. If you'd like to make it contingent upon that, that would be fine. Or if you'd prefer to table it and bring it back to the next council meeting, either one would be fine.
I'd recommend that we amend the motion and can make it contingent if it's possible. And Rob, do you have any concerns about that happening?
No.
Alderman Tierney, did you have a question? Oh.
I would just add for Alderman Sigmart's question, I went through this, the commercial terms in there. It's
they're a monopoly, and so the commercial terms are not real attractive to the city, but we don't have any options. So Rob and Dan and I have talked, and I would move to approve with the contingency that they put the warranty on it
For installation.
for installation.
So there's a motion to approve staff recommendation with the contingency that the approval is contingent upon the installer warranting their work. Okay, Mr. Sigwart?
And that warranty be.
Sorry, hold on a second. Before we can continue the debate, is there a second on that motion? Second. All right, Mr. Sigwart.
Thanks. And that the warranty be satisfactory to staff,
Okay.
including our city attorney.
Mr. Benning, are you willing to amend? Second amend? Okay. Any other questions or concerns on the motion? Okay. So the motion is to approve recommendation contingent upon the installer warranting it to staff's satisfaction. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Ben, this is why we pay attention in social studies. All right. B1, resolution appointing from the Personnel Committee, appointing an acting city treasurer and ratifying prior acts. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the resolution before the council this evening is to appoint the city administrator, myself, to temporarily discharge the duties of the city treasurer finance director with the understanding that I would be in that position for, again, a temporary period of time until the new finance director treasurer is hired. During this period of time, the existing staffing plan that we have in place would continue. And this would allow me, though, as the acting treasurer finance director, to be responsible for the daily tasks and the tasks within the department that are taken on a daily basis. And then it would also give me the authority to execute any agreements that need to be during this interim period. So with that, I would recommend Resolution 2022-21 be adopted.
Any questions? Mr. Sigwart?
I'd make the motion.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that, knowing that we have someone, we're actively looking for that replacement. So
That's correct. We have a number of candidates that have applied and one that we are interviewing on Thursday this week.
Thank you.
So I'm keeping my fingers crossed, and I'm hopeful that that will be the candidate that you guys would see as the common council to appoint in the future.
Thank you.
So there's a motion and a second. Any other questions or concerns? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, moving on to B2. Consideration and possible action on funding allocation for Parks and Recreation personnel expenses. Staff recommends Common Council approve the funding allocation for Parks and Recreation personnel expenses. Emily.
Thank you. The Recreation Director position has been vacant since August 3rd. In the director's absence, 2 staff members, Beth McDonald, the Recreation Coordinator, and John Crane, the Parks and Forestry Superintendent, have stepped in to fill the majority of the duties on an interim basis. As a form of acting pay, staff recommends $1,500 for Beth McDonald and $750 for John Crane for the work they took on in this interim period. The total cost of $2,250 would be reallocated from the Recreation Director's budgeted salary that has sat vacant for 2.5 months. The Personnel Committee approved or recommended approval, and staff recommends approval. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'll make the motion to add that Beth and John have done an exemplary job filling in the absence of the Recreation Director. So I'd support this fully.
Is there a second?
I will second it.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or concerns on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I also want to thank Alderman Gasper and Alderman Pleitner for sitting on the Park and Rec Board and supporting us through that transitionary period of time. So I appreciate your leadership on that as well. Okay, moving on. Number 9A, Ordinance 2022-13, establishing and imposing a park impact fee and amending, repealing, recreating, or renumbering portions of the impact fee ordinance. This is a second reading, and the staff recommends the Common Council adopt Ordinance 2022-13 to establish and impose a park impact fee and amend, repeal, recreate, and or renumber portions of the impact fee ordinance. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in response to the last Common Council meeting at the first reading of this ordinance, there were a number of comments that were provided to staff, and it was asked that staff review those and come back to the Finance Committee with a recommendation based on those comments. Since that time, we have went back, reviewed the ordinance, and there's two modifications that we made within it. The first is in section 18.14.070E2. And what that does is it establishes an automatic annual increase of 3% on January 1st of each year to the base amount for the park impact fees. And then the second thing that we did was provide further authority for the Common Council to expand that increase a little bit further if there's different relevant factors that are occurring that impact the cost structure of the fee. So that could be things like changing the facilities needs, inflation, revised cost estimates, and other factors such as that. The other comment that was made was related to oversight of the park impact fees and how we would be able to do that and making sure that we're monitoring them, and also thinking about how they're being expended for eligible expenses. So there's three pieces that I noted in the memo provided. The first is the annual capital improvement budget. In any given year, if there was a park facility project that would be noted within the CIP that the source of funding is park impact fees. And the council in their oversight role would have the ability to review and approve the budget to determine if the proposed park facility project is an eligible expense to be spent with park impact fee revenues. The second item is the annual audit. The auditor would come in and they would review the segregated fund that holds these revenues. And during that process, the accounting of what was received and what was expended would be reviewed. And then the council, again, during their oversight role, would be able to see what has been spent, and the audit would ascertain the flow of funds in the park impact fee fund. And then the third item is just the finance department monitoring the amount of funds that are collected and then also how they're expended. And I think the crucial thing there is that there is $3.2 million worth of projects that are identified within the park impact fee study. And once we collected that amount, then we would discontinue the collection of park impact fees. So those are the modifications that were made to the ordinance, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or concerns? Alderman Benning.
Tony, we may discuss one more change in finance.
Right. The other piece that we talked about was how is year over year this going to be accounted for, and how this would end up rolling out is that the city has a license and fee schedule, and within that license and fee schedule, it outlines all of the different licenses and fees that the city has. And in doing so, the park impact fees would be listed as well. And also there would be a reference to the code and the ordinance that establishes the authority to have the park impact fee. And each year, the license and fee schedule is approved by the council. So during the budget process, we would continue to increase it by 3%. And then the council during that budget review process would be able to have a discussion about whether or not they wanted to increase it by more than 3%. So that would be kind of the tracking mechanism from year to year of how we would account for any increases in park impact fees.
So with that, I'll move approval with the last modification included.
What's the succinct way to put that in the motion? Just to ensure we have it correct for the record.
I don't think that we need to put it in the motion. It'll just be a
part of the ordinance.
Administrative practice.
Okay. All right. All right, so there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and second. Any questions or concerns? Alderman Sigwart.
This really isn't a question, but when I looked into this further with Tony, it is the person that takes out the building permit for a home that pays it. And the building permit will not be issued until the park impact fee is paid. If it's a apartment building, it's part of the ordinance per unit. So in case you're wondering how it's collected at that time of before the building gets started.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ben, so just so you know, the council takes a first reading 2 weeks ago. We look at an ordinance, then we can take action on it in the second reading, or we can move it to a third reading if we want it to be amended. Ben, I'd like you to come to all the council meetings so I can continually inform the public what we're doing here. Because I don't think they came to hear about water meters tonight.
Or park impact
Or
fees.
park impact fees, or even the next one, which is the ordinance 2022-14, an ordinance prohibiting graffiti. Staff recommends the Common Council adopt ordinance 2022-14 to prohibit and require the removal of graffiti on public and private property. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In response again to the council's feedback, this ordinance was modified as well. There was a section that allows the building inspector the discretion to extend the 10-day deadline for graffiti removal. So the intent here would be to have standard operating practices similar to property maintenance complaints, in that the building inspector allows for an extension, provided that the individual who is being interacted with is showing some reasonable effort to remediate the situation. So that's the one thing that was modified that I hope addresses the concern about the number of days an individual has to clear up the graffiti.
All right, any questions or concerns on the ordinance for graffiti?
I'll state it again. I still think it's an awful lot of burden on a business owner or a resident who has graffiti applied to their residence or their business, and making them responsible in any amount of time to have to clean that off. And I don't want to see graffiti around, but it's a challenge of putting that burden on those individuals that were victims in that case.
Mr. Neumeier?
I concur with Alderman Benning. Private property is private property. I don't think we should be involved in asking people to remove things from their property. If somebody defaces the front of my house, I'm going to take care of it myself. I don't think our building inspector should be involved in that. Public property, yes, but not private property. And I will not support this. Thank you.
If
Council?
Thank you. Sorry. Appreciate that. I just want to point out that if someone does, I guess, inflict graffiti on someone else's property and the property owner is required to clean it, that would be an element of restitution that would be reimbursable to the victim in the court process.
Mr. Brown?
And if I could, I just would, I guess, like to add this to the conversation, and it's in regards to community standards. And I think from a policy perspective and just my opinion about the recommendation that I have is that if we're asking people in property maintenance situations to remediate certain situations, I think it's consistent to ask them as well to remove graffiti. And I fully acknowledge that it is a burden upon a property owner who did not invite or authorize somebody to put that on their property. And I think that's why we want to give the building inspector the authority to be reasonable about what's being asked. But I do understand that perspective. But again, I think from a community standards perspective, we'd still be asking people to remove it regardless. It's just on a staff level, trying to be reasonable in the amount of time that we're asking.
Okay, I'll be looking for a motion.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's moved and seconded. Any questions or concerns on the motion? Mr. Sigwart?
I was originally in Paul's camp, being opposed to the private property discussion, but one of the things that I learned, one of the many things I learned from our city administrator was that this would then be a citation that would go to municipal court as compared to having to go to district court. Is that right, Eric?
Yes, these citations would be heard in municipal, not circuit court.
Thank you.
All right, so there's a motion and a second. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
I'm going to do a voice vote. Aye. Alderman Postel?
No.
Newmeyer, Gasper?
Aye.
No. Benning?
Aye. No.
The motion passes 4-3. Okay, next we move into new business. Schaefer, you can step up to the podium if you'd like, and Bob, if you'd like to switch things over. So the subject tonight is a pre-concept plan for proposed Ozaki Square mixed-use development located north of West Grand Avenue, south of West Washington Street, east of North Milwaukee Street, and west of North Wisconsin Street. This is a discussion item only. The issue is it was asked to provide an opportunity for the developer to bring her proposed ideas for Ozaki Square to the city council and the community for public feedback and alderman feedback in the public to inform any future project refinements. I would just ask that members of the audience make sure that we allow her to speak and get through her different components, and that the aldermen and women will ask their questions when it's our turn. Bob, did you want to introduce anything?
You kind of took my introduction from the report, but this is just a preconceptual plan, and this is just essentially a public informational meeting before any concept plan is even laid out. And it's essentially, you know, we ask the developers or whomever is making a proposal just to show into either a plan commission meeting or a council, common council setting, and just essentially just present the proposal prior to any conceptual plan taken up by the plan commission, which tends to be the first step in such proposals.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to point out one other thing for the audience sake with regard to transparency and rushing the project, or the notion of that. And I just wanted everybody to understand that this format is unique in and of itself compared to the normal development process, because usually pre-concept meetings go directly to the plan commission. But we felt that there was a number of things that made this situation unique, that it should come to the council first. And the couple things that come to mind, and I think this goes to the point that we're trying to bring as much sunlight to this as possible, because we're at really the early stages of this development. And so those couple things are the fact that the project footprint includes public land, the need for all of the impacted properties to be rezoned, and then quite frankly, the significance of the project. I think even at a staff and certainly at a common council level, we realize that this is a rather significant project, and we want to take all the steps that are possible and have encouraged the developer to get feedback from the public, and she's done that on at least 3 occasions prior to this meeting. And then moving forward beyond this, the next step for this, again, as the mayor stated, would be that the concept plan would go to the plan commission in November. And there are a number of other steps. I think there's, at least that I can think of off the top of my head, at least probably 5 to 6 other meetings that will happen. So I just want to make that clear, because we're not treating this project necessarily any different than any other development project. We're actually trying to amplify the ability for people to hear about it by having it in this setting. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Mayor Knightsky. Thank you, council members. I truly appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak to you all this evening. This is clearly a community that cares, and I like to work with communities that care. Next slide, please. Tonight, I would like to review 6 key points. 1, who is Schaefer Development? 2, why Port Washington? 3, what we heard from our listening sessions. 4, what is the proposed plan? 5, what does this mean for Port Washington? And 6, next steps. Our mission statement at Schaefer Development, I started this company in 2001 with a duplex, and I was a single mom supporting a family. And my mission is to make a difference while making a living, to be good stewards of the land, and to create collaborative community developments that are beneficial to all concerned. I have 21 years of development experience, and did that whole slide come up? It looks like I think it's missing a few points. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Sorry, you have the fancy one. So we have 21 years of development experience. We approach development collaboratively to create positive outcomes for the community, the municipality, and the development team. We have dynamic mixed-use expertise with extensive experience with complicated infill redevelopments in Ozaukee County. Our projects have generated millions of dollars in property taxes and sales tax revenue. We are financially strong with the ability and the history of completing developments on time and on budget. In the upper, could we just go back for a second, Bob? In the upper left-hand corner is my most recent project. It's Mequon Spur 16. It consisted of 20,000 square feet of commercial space with an adaptive reuse of old public works buildings that we turned into the Mequon Public Market, St. Paul's Seafood, and a health and wellness building. In addition, we have three-story buildings and 10 townhomes for a total of 156 units. We completed the project in 17 months. It is 95% occupied and 100% occupied on our commercial space. We survived the pandemic and we've done very well. One of the things that is near and dear to my heart, important to me, and one of the things I feel like we're really good at and pay attention to is activating community spaces. The thing that gives me the greatest joy is when I can go out to the market and we have music and I see families and grandparents with their grandchildren. We didn't have this in our community prior to this development. I have people coming up to me on a regular basis thanking me that they have a place to go and meet with their families. In addition, we have a Rotary meeting there every week. The Optimist Club meets. We give our space away to nonprofits in our community. We usually have some sort of water feature or fire feature, and our goal is really to bring the community together. And I will tell you, I had a lot of opposition when I developed this. No one thought we could repurpose these public works buildings into such a beautiful site. And I welcome anybody that wants to come and tour. I'd be happy to give you a personal tour. Next slide, please. Why Port Washington? That question is asked a lot. I spent a lot of time researching. I came here originally because I wanted to do an agricultural neighborhood, which I'm still hoping to do. But when I came here and I walked around, I had my little dog Stella with me, and she sometimes waits in the car, so I took her for a walk around the block. And I saw that big empty parking lot, and I thought, I think there's an opportunity here. I then researched your 5-year strategic plan, and I reviewed the town plan, which I know hasn't been approved, but it's on the website. What it said in your plans was that you want to be a premier community on the Great Lakes, that you want to be a community that fosters relationships, that make the community a warm and friendly, inviting place where people want to live. I think that's true. There's a lot of great people here. It's a wonderful community. Activate underutilized public space and create amenities. Expand opportunities for the public-private partnerships for affordable housing. This is directly out of the strategic plan. Create an attractive, diverse development that enhances commercial corridors. One of the things on the commercial, can I just go back to the commercial corridors? When I was doing my research and walking around, I walked down Franklin Street, which is really kind of like your main street here. And one of the owners of the businesses said, Cindy, we have a problem with parking, that people they drive down Franklin Street and there's nowhere to park on Franklin Street. And I said, I agree. And he said, well, if we had some sort of parking structure or some sort of parking, or the large surface parking, and there was some sort of shuttle that would take people from that space downtown, it would help to activate that space and alleviate that perception. There's parking here, there's just not a lot of parking on that main street, and there's no wayfinding. People don't know where the parking is. I'm gonna talk about that more as I go on. So we held 3 listening sessions. We held one on a Saturday, and that one was outside in the parking lot, which was great because people could really see the space. And then we had 2 more listening sessions at different times. What we heard, the highest concerns from people were parking, height, fitting the personality of Port Washington. We heard that a lot tonight. Concerns and confusion on the impact of TIF, and concerns over displacing existing businesses. I think that's concurrent with what we heard here this evening. What people liked, next slide, please. We had high praise and suggestions for workforce housing. There was one woman that came to our listening session and she said, I'm living in the basement of my parents' home with my husband and my 2 children because I cannot find or afford a place to live in Port Washington. Community gathering spaces was something that people were excited about and wanted to see. Increased free covered parking. They like that idea. Library, the consolidation of a library, a senior center, city hall, whatever that may be. Again, this is just a concept. We're just throwing out ideas there. Having an ice rink, having public art. The idea of having something that is not at the lakefront in the winter because it's cold in the winter. And what I heard from people was that Port Washington gets a little quieter in the winter. Would you guys agree with that? That most of your business and impact happens during the summer when the marina's full. And so by activating this space in the center of town, it would be away from the winds and have a little bit more of a gathering space away from the downtown. Honoring, and then library senior center, kind of a consolidation of that. And then the suggestion, these were suggestions from the community, was to honor the history of Port Washington and not just the Mariners' history, but also the history of the indigenous people of this community. Next slide, please. So here are the results. Now I have to look at my sheet. So we had a total of 55 people that attended our 3 sessions. 44% were in favor of what we presented, 29% disagreed, and 27% were undecided. Now I'd like to get into the proposed plan. Next slide. So this is directly from the downtown plan, which is on the city's website. It has not been, help me guys, it's not been approved, right? It's just.
Nope, it's still underway.
It's still underway.
Still going.
Okay. But you hired consultants to Grafe and Associates and who else? And Kubala-Washaka Architects to kind of evaluate the sites in the area. So these are several of the sites that, there were several sites identified. The red circle is the area that I'm proposing for Ozaki Square. Next slide, please. This is what Kubala-Washaka and Grafe suggested be placed there. So this is their imagery, not mine, but this is what was suggested in the downtown plan. Next slide, please. So what was the inspiration? How do we come up with this concept? When I was walking around the square with Stella, I looked up and saw the beautiful courthouse building. And I had never really taken a close look at it. Thankfully, I've never had to be there for anything, but it's a beautiful building. And then I also looked at the administration building, which frankly, I always thought was a little ugly. But when I really looked at it, it's got beautiful stone. It's really, I know it was a former prison, right? Was that true? Somebody told me that. No. A part of it, but it's gone. So, but when I looked at it and I looked at the stone, it's really a beautiful building. So then I started doing some research, and the parking lot just seemed like an opportunity to be a square or a plaza. And I did research. I looked at different squares and plazas actually around the world, but the one that resonated with me was Copley Square in Boston, Massachusetts. Now that is a church. It's called Trinity Church, but the style is somewhat similar to the county courthouse. And if you see the green space in front of Trinity Church, I think that day they were holding a farmer's market. So that was where the inspiration for this design came from. Next slide, please. So this is the existing site. And I don't think my laser pointer is going to work. Jen, did you have one? I don't know if yours will work here. Oh, there. No, it won't work on the screen. So I apologize for that. I do have printed copies that I can give people. What can I use? Oh, it'll work on the screen. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Sort of. Okay. So now everyone's going to have to turn around. But here's City Hall. Here's the Java Dock building, which I have under contract. Here's a parking lot. Here's the Family Promise building. I'm working with Family Promise. I know many of the board of directors there. Their building needs a significant amount of work, and they're in support of a new space here when we rebuild this. In the back, this is all a big swath of parking lot. This is the hill with a little park on top. And then you have these cluster 3 historic buildings. You have the Poole Funeral Home building, and there's a home behind that, and you have the Edward Jones building. It was interesting when I met with Mr. Poole, he grew up in that funeral home, above the funeral home, and he told me that this area was a neighborhood with homes, and that the space to the parking, the police and fire lot was a park. So it was really interesting to hear his story. He also told me that his grandmother started the funeral home. I think she was one of the first female morticians, and she started the funeral home 100 years ago. And he also talked to me about the construction and the quality of the building. So after meeting with him, I really felt strongly that those buildings needed to be saved. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of what we're proposing. A building along Grand Avenue. The first floor would be 10,000 square feet of commercial space. We're hoping that we can keep as many of the existing residents as possible. We would love to see the Java Dock stay. We'd love to see other residents stay. The current rent of the Java Dock building, I analyzed the leases, is around $10 to $15, actually closer to $15 a square foot. So people aren't actually paying under market. That's pretty much what the market rent is, but because their spaces are so small, it makes the rent affordable. So what I would hope to see, and I'd like to work with them, I'm a female-owned business. I started cleaning houses, and I know how hard it is. I feel for you. I know what it's like. So I don't want to put anybody out of business. I think that there would be opportunities in the new existing space, and I feel that there would be opportunities in the historic cluster of homes here. In addition, there's a building right here that's vacant, and the owner is willing to sell or rent it. And also, I've been approached by a few other local businesses that have space within that area. So I do not want to put anybody out of business. I want to work with people to help them. Next slide, please. So these are massings. I know they look like square boxes, but you put a massing up so you can kind of see how the building feels and the space feels. We do not have renderings of what the building's going to look like because I need to get more feedback from the community. I do not want to rush this, and I know you don't want to rush it. So we need to take our time and be sensitive and fit in the personality of Port Washington. I'm still trying to figure that out, but I want to try. So here again, you'll see this is the building on Grand and Milwaukee Street. So this goes up to Milwaukee Street. This goes down Washington along Wisconsin. We've made some changes since we've done these buildings. We took off 3 floors on the top of this building based on community input and feedback. We were originally going to remove the old buildings on Wisconsin, and after meeting with the owners and talking to the community, we felt like we had a chance to repurpose and save those old buildings. Next slide, please. This is a view looking west into the development. And again, you can see this whole section was eliminated from the plan. These buildings will now we're saving the Poole Funeral Home, the building behind it, and the Edward Jones. So there'll be a line of 3 historic homes here. The space along here is at this time a gray box of roughly 26,000 square feet. It could be a library, it could be a senior center, it could be City Hall. there's many options for this space. So again, this is a concept. Having a library with residential is a trend that has been happening throughout the country. The nice part about that is it's an amenity for your residents. It helps pay for the library. I spoke to the librarian from the Cedarburg Library, came to one of my listening sessions, and she said, our library gets used so much with people coming in. It has free internet. It has conference rooms that you can rent. They have event space there. They have kids classes there. So I love the idea. It's not my decision, but I love the idea of having a library there. We've put in kind of a rooftop terrace that would be accessible so people could sit outside and read. And then again, in the center, you have this space that would be activated. Next slide, please, Bob. This is the view looking east on Main Street. And what we're proposing here is to do curbless streets so that you could, if you wanted to, you could close the street off and have events and activities there and expand the size of the plaza. And in addition, we are adding, oops, sorry. I don't know what that is. In addition, we're adding a loggia on the front. Thank you. I'm going to put it down here. We're adding a loggia in the front of the administration building, which is an armature. And this will give that building such a great look. Right now, it's a flat building. So it really would add some aesthetic character to that building. I think there were plans in the works that needed some ADA modifications to this building, so that would also be done at the same time. You can see we'd activate the streets with seating for the people that worked in the administration building at City Hall, so they could come out, they could sit outside. It would be a very attractive, cost-effective addition to that building and make it look so much better. Next slide, please. This is the view if you were sitting on the terrace above the library, looking south. So this is the northwest corner that you're looking south into the plaza or square. And again, you could see the square would be activated with activities, with gardens, and other things. Okay, next slide. Okay, parking. Parking was a big issue, a big concern. We studied the parking significantly. And what we found, we went out and counted the current surface parking spaces. So currently there's 165 parking spaces, surface parking free community spaces. So what we are proposing, and it'll unfold in the future slides, is structured deck parking that would be free to the public. And it would increase the parking from 165 spaces to 178 spaces. Next slide, please. So this slide is slices of the buildings to kind of give you a feel of what they look like. As you can see, one of the advantages of this site is the grade, because the grade is lower on Grand and it increases up to, as you go up to Washington Street. And because of that, we don't need to do underground parking. So on the first floor along Grand Avenue, we would activate Grand Avenue with commercial spaces. Hopefully, we can get the existing tenant, as many of the existing tenants to stay here. The purple spaces that you see are parking. So that's where those 176 parking spaces fit in. Above the parking, on this slide in the rear building, you could see the community space, and then above that, the residential space. We're anticipating, again, we're just in the planning stages, roughly 90 units per building. That's what we're anticipating right now. And then as you can see, we removed 3 stories based on feedback from the community. And we also are going to restore the old building. So we changed the plan based on the feedback from the community. Next slide, please, Bob. So height is a big concern. And I understand that. We looked at the height, and I think it's always hard to kind of see what, in context, what the height is going to look like. So here we did an image board of here's the building, and this is the height compared to City Hall. So I think there was a lot of discussion that the height should not be higher than this. Or the courthouse, I'm sorry. The height should not be higher than this, but this is where the Grand Avenue building would fall. Next slide, please. On Washington Street, this slide shows the height of that building in context to, is it the Sweet Cake Apartments? Is that the name of it? Yes. So the height of that building would hit that point of the Sweet Cake Apartments. And as you can see, again, it would be we'd go down slightly. We're thinking about we might go down just 6 feet to keep the height low. And then if you look here on Washington Street, it would be 2 stories above Washington Street. I can't read that, but it's about 2 stories above Washington Street. I have had many conversations with Mr. Schuler and also John and his wife who own the ice cream, chocolate, yes. So I've had many conversations with Mr. Schuler, many emails. I'm going to his home next week with my architect, who I forgot to introduce, John Frank. He's my protege this evening, and concerns about that. I just want to clarify, Paul, I didn't say the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. I don't think I'd refer to myself as a devil, although some people might. But what I said to him was, based on the plan, based on the downtown plan, if I don't develop the project, and which I may not, I may decide not to do this, somebody else is going to come in and come up with a proposal. And so what I said is I don't think you'll find developers who are going to spend the time to do community meetings, that are going to come to your home and that are going to try their best to address your needs. I just don't think you see that. And that's one of the reasons that I've been successful in what I do, because I do what I say I'm going to do. Next slide, please. So here we're talking about the historic, what we like to call the historic cluster. What we plan to do, here's the Poole Funeral Home building, which is an absolutely gorgeous building. I was in it. I met with Mr. Poole. Then we have the this building is behind the Poole Funeral Home building. It's currently a duplex, but I believe it was originally a judge's home. Someone told me the story, they'd see the judge running across the street when he was late to court. And then here we have the Edward Jones building. I have moved buildings in the past. I've moved a gas station that became an American Legion post. I know the Schutte Moving Company, and I talked to them, and the plan is to move this building in between the Poole Funeral Home building and the Edward Jones building, which would create a cluster of 3 historic homes on Wisconsin Avenue. I feel strongly that those homes could be repurposed for some of the existing businesses that are being displaced. I feel that we could work together. There's loans and grants, Women's Business Initiative, there's a Main Street grant, there's WAEDC, and I would be willing to help them and work with them. I don't need to own these buildings, so if there was a way to find that these businesses could actually own their own buildings, I would encourage that. I would encourage them to try to own their own buildings, and I would help support them if I could. Next slide, please. So what are we going to put in the square? What's some ideas? Public art and gardens were something that we heard a lot during our listening sessions. You'll see the first picture in the corner is a fish. Remind me of Port Washington, a fish, but it's encased in bushes. We want to honor the historic history of Port Washington, so we would have plaques throughout the plaza. This is a sculptor, an indigenous sculptor that created this. This one I love. It's boats, and then the blue below is glass. It's a really unique sculpture. This is a kaleidoscope. Mr. Poole, when I've asked people what they want, Mr. Poole suggested this kaleidoscope by a sculptor who does these up in Door County. And here are some they're flower statues that light up at night. Just a few ideas and suggestions of what could be done in that public square. Next slide, please. Additional ideas. So obviously the Bean in Chicago, we're not going to go that big, but you see how a sculpture can bring people together. An ice rink was something that people brought up. They said there used to be a lot more ice rinks in Port Washington. I think this location and being away from the lake and being sheltered could be a potentially great ice skating rink, and it would bring in activities in the winter. Here you see a market. There's a potential that maybe your farmer's market would want to come to the square. In this slide, you see outdoor igloos that are heated. I don't know if any of you have been to Cafe Hollander. They were one of my tenants in one of my properties, and they put in these igloos that are heated in the winter, so it could activate this space. Do you have them here? Oh yeah, the wine, is it the wine place? Beanie's has them. Do you like them? Are they? Yeah. I mean, how much fun would that be to have those here? You could have music events. This is a Christmas market. This is what's there now. This is the view of what's there now, is a big surface parking lot. Next slide, please. Okay, the current tax base on this site right now is $26,292 a year. Next slide, please. The potential tax base of this development would be $578,032. The estimated tax base increase is $551,740. It's well over $500,000 of increased tax base. Next slide, please. What does this mean for Port Washington? We want to activate underutilized parcels in the center of downtown. Again, this comes from your strategic plan. It creates a diverse, attractive development in public space and public space. It creates a public and private partnership for needed affordable housing. It was brought up today about our businesses not being able to find workers. I know with my restaurants, it's a struggle to find people. We mentioned the firefighters and our policemen and some of them not being paid well. Some people can't afford to live in this community, including teachers and seniors and people that serve us daily. It creates additional parking. It consolidates city services. So if you put the senior center and city hall and you could put things together, it would consolidate and potentially save costs. And it increases the tax base by over $500,000. Next slide, please. What are our next steps? I want to emphasize again, this is not a final plan. This is a concept plan. I'm here to listen to you and get your feedback. We collaborate with the city and county to purchase and assemble parcels needed to complete this concept. We collaborate on the consolidation of city services. We create a new TIF district to support parking structures, sidewalks, and public space. We generate over $500,000 of excess property tax that would cover this cost. Tonight, we're asking for Common Council feedback on this project. And I believe our last slide is, again, another view looking into Ozaki Square, looking east toward the lake. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to present this evening, and I welcome your comments.
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. Council? Alderwoman Postle?
I'll go. First, I want to say thank you to everybody for your respectful comments. I didn't know what to expect tonight, so bless your heart. We didn't have to dive under the desks or anything like that, so thank you. You are learning with us. We've not seen these before, so we're learning together. I do have a couple of comments, though.
Sure.
I saw on the plans that were in our packet, the traffic direction on Main Street, and it's always bugged me, goes from, it goes from west to east.
Right.
So suppose this project does move forward and you build the square, and you have someone who's traveling from Franklin Street who wants to go to the square. They're going to run into a giant "Do Not Enter" sign, which is not very welcoming to a new development. I would ask you to consider, within your plan, changing the direction of Main Street so that it pulls downtown and the new development together.
So would you like a two-way street or just a one-way going the other way?
I'd be very happy with either, but the way it is now is just wrong.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. My other suggestion, and I believe that the strongest and longest lasting attachments are to people, to community, and being a part of something special. Recently, our mayor worked to have the street in front of the high school renamed to, is it Pirates Way? All right. That actually brought the high school community together. It gave them a sense of pride to the name of the street in front of the high school. I don't know how anybody else feels, but I personally feel that the name Ozaki Square is off-putting. It's not Port Washington centric.
Sure.
If you could consider a different name, Port Place, Port Washington Square, or Port Plaza, something like that that is unique to our city that can help build that community and that sense of pride.
I'm more than willing to do that. I'd like to honor the people. I mean, I'd like to honor Patrick Poole's grandmother. You know, I'd like to really research this and come up with that. So I think that's a great idea. And typically, just, you know, names always change in projects. You start with one and it changes. So I appreciate that.
Alderman Newmeyer.
If you could address possibly the relocation of the smaller businesses that are currently in the building next door, that's a concern of mine, being small businesses. Where would we go with those businesses in the meantime so they can maintain their livelihood?
So the plan, as I see it, and it could change, would be to do the northern building first. So we wouldn't be displacing any businesses probably for well over a year, maybe 2 years. So we would do the northern building first. Depending on what the city decides they want to put there could be some potential space there. But I really like the idea of repurposing the buildings on Wisconsin Avenue, and we could offer them space in those buildings as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Gassman?
Sure. Just looking at the plan around the square, we have the library or other building would be towards the north end. Towards the west side, though, it looks like it would just be parking structure on the first floor. Would there be any other opportunity to activate that space with potential commercial space or something that would use that? 'Cause otherwise, the square itself, we end up with the library on the north end of it. It has very limited hours. It's closed by 8 on, at 8 in the evening, except on Fridays it closes at 6, I believe. Saturday it's only open till 1. The courthouse on the south side is only open during, work hours during the week. So, there's, without another attractor, some more attractors in there, it feels like this has an opportunity to be kind of a dead square. Because the places that would attract it aren't open on Sundays, they aren't open on Saturday afternoons at all. So you kind of lose those attractors there.
Sure.
And the current plan just shows first floor parking structure on the west side.
Sure. Yeah, parking and the library, but I agree. I think we could activate that space. Right now, we have 26,000 square feet of gray box there. So maybe that could come down and we could do, there's a lot of possibilities. I mean, it's really important to do a 24/7 activation. So you have things going on, like you're saying, morning, noon, and evening. Another idea that was suggested to us would be food trucks in the evening, which would activate the space. And if you had an ice rink or some other activities going on, that would activate the space as well.
Also curious, for the home off of Main Street that you show relocating, you show simply translating it east so that what is currently the east side of the building continues to face east. Why not, is that just inadvertent, or are you planning on rotating the building 90 degrees so at the current front of the building still ends up facing Wisconsin Avenue?
John, do you want to come and answer that, or? It's placed, and didn't you tell me that the front of the building is on that side of it? Because I asked the same question. There's an entry on that side. On that side, yeah.
Well, there's an entry towards the north end. You then have the area with windows that sticks out, but the southern third of the building has no windows whatsoever. It's just a blank brick wall, whereas the side that faces Main Street is clearly, the front of your building. Mm-hmm. And to me, it just seems like it would look odd at that location.
I mean, obviously we haven't refined it yet, but I hear what you're saying.
Okay. Other question, so it's going to be free parking. How is that going to be financed long-term? Because parking structures are really expensive.
Correct.
How's that being maintained?
It's going to be through the $500,000 of tax revenue that we generate and in collaboration with the city and the.
So it's the city's long-term obligation to pay to maintain the parking?
I don't know. We haven't gotten through that yet, but it's a discussion item that we'd have to look into.
Okay. And by the way, I would vote for Main Street to be two-way.
Okay. Two-way Main Street. Bob, are you writing this down?
Yep. Mr. Benning?
Yeah, so I just want to thank the audience tonight. As Alderman Postle said, I appreciate feedback and comments. And Ms. Schaefer, I appreciate your very detailed explanation of your ideas and concepts. I know that's where we're at. We're not at design. We're not anywhere near
No,
that.
it's just
so
an idea. Thank you.
I guess a few suggestions, comments. I hope that you're using LEED certification targets
Yes, I
as you
have
do buildings.
my project in my Spur 16 project is the first LEED certified multifamily in Ozaukee County.
I
LEED
love-
silver and LEED gold.
Yeah, I love to see that. I'd love to see solar on the roof. If there was an opportunity to take advantage of that. I know that we're a long ways from getting there, but I'll be very interested, like a lot of the members of the audience, to understand what rents will be, especially those classified as worker wage type of thing. I've spent a lot of time in the past few months studying what Gen Z populations are, and that's really middle schoolers today through age 22. And Gen Z and Mayor and I've had this discussion. They don't have driver's licenses. They want to live in a place where they can walk to work. And I think this is right on for those folks. They want to walk to downtown. They want to walk to wherever they're going to be for entertainment, for meals and things like that. So I think that's our going to be your target audience. And they're generally the ones that are starting in their working lives and entry-level wages and things like that. So love to see where that comes out in this type of thing. I think the questions around the square of who's managing it, who's running it, who owns it, those kind of things, need to be worked out. I think the parking for me is as well significant benefit, but as Alderman Gasper said, who owns it, who maintains it, a lot of questions there too.
Understandably.
So thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Any other
Mayor.
council members?
I'll try to be brief. Thanks for coming, everyone, tonight. I think I represent a different demographic than most of the people in the audience tonight. So for me, it's about having a public space to gather with my family that doesn't necessarily exist other than Upper Lake Park, Veterans Park, things of that nature. So I look forward to another gathering place for the community, for those of us with young children. Of course, with this, I would agree with Alderman Gasper about having the sunset hours of the public amenities there. Anytime we introduce those things, City Hall, of course, which doesn't have a location, it's been displaced in this plan, right? Cindy, we've talked about that, that City Hall does not exist in this site any longer as it appears tonight.
Yeah,
Right, so-
it could. We
course.
just don't know. Yeah.
Of course. So certainly when you include discussions around the library, the City Hall, community center, I'll call it a community center because I think that's where I would like to head for all ages, that this could all be a part of that conversation. So while I would agree with Alderman Gasper that it would tend to sunset if the library closes at 8 p.m., 6 p.m. on Fridays, 1 p.m. on Saturdays, that a community center could take the place of those adjacent hours. That would just be a proposal. I guess I would also like to see further information and clarification on the parking stalls and the number of, right? So if the net increases, that's fine, but the number of residents is certainly going to be much, much higher.
The parking spaces that go to were public parking. They did not include residential.
Thank
So
you.
residential is separate from that.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Okay. And then I guess I'd like to reemphasize that we're not moving fast here. I'm glad everyone came tonight and spoke passionately because I certainly am as passionate as you all are about our community and our downtown. So I'd just like to reemphasize that this will all be held very transparently, and I'd like to to advise that we move slowly on this. Thank you.
Understood.
Yes, sir. Alderman Tierney.
Okay, again, I guess I would join everyone else in thanking everyone for their respectful comments tonight and their attention to the presentation. And Ms. Schaefer, I think you've done an excellent job. I want to talk a little bit about the housing aspect of this because I've been reading up a lot on workforce housing, and I find, and even just looking up on things on workforce housing in Wisconsin, I see everything from 80, that it's for people of 80% or less of the median income, or a range from 60 to 120% of median income. And so that's a pretty broad range to me. Yeah. And it's identified frequently as the type of housing that would be for teachers or for police officers, firefighters, that type of thing, more public servants. We probably have a need for that in the community. I'm not saying we don't, but it doesn't really address people who fall below that. And I know we don't have housing in the community for those people. So, and another thing about this whole thing is I don't know, once any housing hits the market, it tends to go to the cost of the market. So I don't know, I mean, we call it workforce housing, but if it winds up costing, as somebody mentioned, I don't even remember which one of the commenters, if it winds up costing $2,000 a month, you're going to have to be a pretty strong worker. So we don't really have a way of controlling that.
Sure.
And I don't know if you can address that.
Yeah,
or not.
I'm glad you asked that question. It's a good question. And the one thing that was brought up today is that workforce housing will bring in, maybe some undesirable people into the community. I want to point out that all the qualifications for workforce housing are the same for a Class A property. It's fair housing, and they have to have a credit check and a criminal check like anywhere else. So that I just wanted to answer that question. It's affordable housing, workforce housing is complicated. And so I'm not trying to be elusive here. It's based on an award. So it's a scoring system that's set up by the state of Wisconsin. And the scoring system has recently changed. So you submit your proposal and you get a score. And it's based on how many units you have, at what price point, at what size, and in what location. You put together a package and a proposal. They like projects that have libraries and municipal buildings with them. You get extra points for that. If it's LEED certified, you get extra points for that. So you put together a package and a proposal, and it's a competitive bid through WIDA. So that package is actually due in January. So depending on where we are in this cycle, if we could submit that by January, that would be great, because they don't then award. Then what happens is if you get the credits, they award them in April. So on a building, like on one of those buildings, that could be a significant amount of money. It could be $10 million. But what that $10 million does, it offsets the costs of the building so the developer can afford to provide apartments at below market rates. And it's audited every year to make sure that you're doing that. And if you don't do that, the money can be taken away. So it's a complicated system, and it's very thoroughly vetted, and it's thoroughly enforced. I anticipate that probably this whole project would not be workforce, because I don't know if that's viable to do it that way. I would like to do potentially half the project as workforce. But again, I don't know until I submit my application, and I may or may not be awarded the credits. So that is part of the capital stack of your development. You'll have private equity. When I did my Spur 16 project, I raised $7.7 million in private equity that was mostly from local people in the community that wanted to support our project. Then you look at some kind of TIF. Then you look at some kind of HUD or WIDA subsidy. There's also grants. So with a project of this size and this complicated, you'll have several different items in your capital stack, and that would be one of them.
And then if I could, just one, and TIF is one of those things that it's a very complicated subject. I spent a lot of time reading about it, and I know that I think the original concept behind TIF was something that I liked. It was the idea that it was a way of bringing back blighted areas or brownfields and things like this. And I know the Wisconsin legislature has kind of changed the rules on it and made it much more open. And I don't really think, in my mind, that wasn't necessarily a good thing. It's kind of like it seems to me that now so many developers, they're building in TIF money into their plan automatically. And I'm really going to have to see some hard and fast benefits before I can vote yes for TIF for this project, just so that you know.
No, and that's another good question. And I was very forthright when I came in. I don't like to come in and say, oh, later I'm going to need this. I'm going to tell you right now that this project is going to need something. It's going to need TIF. It's going to need WIDA. It's a big project. But I think the simplest way to look at this is you have a current site that generates $26,000 a year in tax revenue. If this site was developed, it would generate over $500,000 in tax revenue. I'm not asking for upfront money. There's different ways to do it. When I did my Grafton project, which was an infill site, the village bought all the land and then they sold it to me for $1. When I did my Mequon project, it was very similar. The municipality bought the land and they sold it to me. That was a competitive bid and they sold it to me because I was the only developer that was going to keep and restore the old buildings. Everyone else was going to tear them down and build strip malls. I paid over $500,000 in property taxes on a site that was previously generated $7. So we are paying back the cost through the property tax increase of what it costs the municipality to purchase that land. And we gave them a beautiful public market with beautiful active community spaces. And as far as the apartments there, I'm now seeing a lot of people, like Alderman Pleitner said, I'm getting young professionals from the city. They don't want to live in the city anymore. They don't want the traffic and the noise. So we're getting young professionals that come and live in our apartments. They might live there for 3 or 4 years, but then they buy homes in the community and they raise children in the community. I'm getting seniors and empty nesters, many of whom had second homes. They don't want to leave their community. They don't want to leave their community. They want to go to their second home, and then they have an apartment here in Port Washington, and then they can travel and they don't have to take care of homes, and they don't want to live in senior housing. So I believe very strongly in multi-generational housing and that it does benefit the community.
Mr. Sigwart.
I have a very difficult question, Mrs. Schaefer.
Have at it. I'm ready.
There's been a lot of comments from the council on details. I'm not going to ask you a question about details. My question is this all or nothing? Is it all or nothing?
Well, first of all, Mr. Sigwart, the devil is in the details. And that is why I am spending.
Wait, Cindy, I thought you said you weren't going to use that word.
I wasn't supposed to say that. I didn't say I was a devil. I said the devil's in the details.
That word
Let's
is,
clarify
strike that from the record.
Strike that word. And that's why I'm spending so much time researching this and listening to people and trying to get this right. I don't want to rush this. I want it to be right. That's why I'm not coming before the Planning Commission on Thursday. That's why we're coming in November, and hopefully we'll have something that meets the personality of Port Washington. I was encouraged when I submitted a couple different options, but this was the option that really seemed to make the most sense. I can look at other options, but I really think that this is the most meaningful, and I really feel like it will create a public space, needed housing, and commercial space that you'll all be proud of. I think if we don't do that whole block, it's not going to be a meaningful development.
Which whole block?
Grand Avenue section.
Okay, because that's my primary question.
Yeah.
My office used to be right behind this wall over here.
Yeah.
50 years ago.
Sure.
I'd like to see an option that leaves City Hall where it is and leaves the Java Dock building where it is and adds the tower to the west end of your building. If it's space.
You'd like the tower back?
Personally?
Yeah.
I'd rather have City Hall back traded for a tower. Because when you first came to us in our brief 45-minute session, you said the tower, residential tower on the west end of the Grand Avenue building was optional.
Yeah.
If it was optional, if it goes back, City Hall could remain. Because actually this corner on your plan is shown as kind of a park space. Correct?
Not really. I mean, it's somewhat of a park space, but.
But my question is, if there's going to be an alternative, I'd like that alternative to be City Hall remain,
and
Java Dock building, the old opera remain, okay?
Sure.
And that go back and consider the tower. Because if it's a number of units that pays for parking, et cetera, that should be a trade-off.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm more than willing to look at it, Mr. Sigwer. I do think it would have to be more than just the 12 units in that tower, but I'm more than willing to look at it and see if we can come up with a concept that would save those buildings. Originally we were going to tear down 5 buildings, and we got it down to 2. So
But I remember staff said, don't come in tearing down 5 buildings because it won't fly.
yeah.
My real question is City Hall inadequate? And I think it needs some work. Barry Genson's firm, when he worked here, Blong Kemp at the time, designed this building. It was built in 58, okay? It was remodeled by the same firm, designed by Chris with your firm many years ago, okay? My question is, that City Hall is viable. When I came to town, Harry's was on the corner of Main Street and Franklin Street.
Sure.
And I used to go there, I hate to admit it, but I used to go there and sit with the old guys when I was 30 years old. And I learned that they really liked Harry's, okay? Harry's is gone. Where do those old guys go now? They go to McDonald's way on the north end of town, which have lost downtown. So
Sure.
to me, today I had 2 meetings at the Java Dock.
Sure.
And that's a place where a lot of people go to do business and meet. And I think it has a lot of value for the small businesses that are there. So the alternative I'd like to see is, what does it take to leave these 2 buildings in place?
Okay. I'm willing to look at that.
Thank you.
I'm willing to look at it and consider it.
No, I'm sorry, you can't. Other comments from council? Anybody else have a hankering for sour cream coffee cake from Harry's now because of Mr. Sigwart? Okay, then I'd like to add a couple of things in here, Ms. Schaefer, so thank you. One is for the community, I don't get a vote. I only get to veto. And one of the things that I think when we come in front of Planning Commission, just so you're aware, I'm really conflicted about all of this as someone who grew up here and loves history and loves our downtown and loves all the different things about Port Washington. So, one of them, and nobody said it, but I'm going to take a stand. Like, I don't want Niederkorn Library moved. I think our library is fantastic. The city's got to find the resources to do something better with it. And, it's historical and romantic for a lot of us. And Mr. Niederkorn and the family and the people who worked for that company, and for me, that's really, really important part of Port Washington to me. I do appreciate the moving of the historic buildings and the consideration in that, because when you first showed us some of your conceptual plans, so I think that's fantastic. Honoring the legacy of the people who live there and those different components. That really, to me, because if it's your property and you decide to bring it forward, that's what you get to do. And I think that face across from the post office and how that would enter there as we go forward.
Thank you.
I'm conflicted with the Ozaki Square idea too, but I'm very energized by the idea of doing something to honor the indigenous people who were here before us. And I think that's really, really important, whether that be tribal or in the art or whatnot. I don't think we can forget that either. If we're going to talk about the history of Port Washington, we can't just look at our own. I am concerned. I do not agree with Alderman Sigwart, and I don't mean to call you out, but I do not want that height. This is just my opinion. I really want the views of Port Washington to be honored from the hills, et cetera. Not that the people who have the tower in the corner of the Tellos building deserve or get to keep that forever, but to go up 5-6 stories along Main Street would fundamentally change our entrance into town. So I'm concerned about that. When we talk about workforce housing, frankly, workforce housing isn't the problem. It's that we don't pay our teachers and our public servants a livable wage. So I don't know if we can address all of that, but when we look at the housing stock for the city of Port Washington, I do appreciate that this is mixed because this is an expensive place to live. And as a teacher who married another teacher, it was very hard for us to find our first home on Webster Street here in Port Washington to stay here. TIF is going to have to be really, really attractive for the city. And as much as, we would like to help you out, at the end of the day, the city of Port Washington's got to significantly benefit from this before I'd be very supportive for a lot of TIF dollars. And finally, for the community and the members of our audience tonight, a developer agreement has to be made. And in that conversation and those pieces, your feedback as well as what you heard from the council and our developer will all be taken into consideration. But I will not be supportive of a developer's agreement. Again, like we've talked about in the past, that's not to the benefit of our city. So, Ms. Schaefer, I'm really grateful for your vision and your ideas. It's refreshing to have, kind of someone come in and really kind of shock the system. We've been fighting about smaller buildings, and here you come along with a potential $100+ million project, which we were not expecting or had any ideas of. I really wanted to get our lighthouse painted. That was about as exciting as I wanted to get as mayor. And we're going to do that. But, addressing our infrastructure in the city of Port Washington is a critical piece. Mrs. Didier is right. The thing we have to do is we have to make sure that we take care of what we have and ensure that we can, retain what we have. And as we build forward, we can't lose anything in the interim. So really grateful for you coming tonight. I'm serious. I wrote a note to myself. I can't imagine what it was like to sit back there. So I had a lot of empathy for you. So thank you for that.
I'm grateful and I'm appreciative of the people that came out tonight to speak. It's important to me to hear what people have to say. And if pace is important to this community, then it's also important to me. I want to get this right. I don't want to do something that's not right. And if you didn't have a chance to speak and you have any questions for me, my website is schaeferdevelopment.com. There's a tab in there that says Schaefer Listens. And if you send me an email, it comes directly to me, and I will answer you and I will respond to you. So I'm happy and I welcome opportunities to speak with any of you.
Yeah, and for everyone in the community, it's Schaefer with 2 Fs, no C.
SHAFFER, Schaffer Development.
Because most of us had Fred Schaefer at the high school, and we would
Yep.
not have spelled it that way.
Yep.
All right, but seriously, I do appreciate the courage to come in. I also appreciate that you took the time to meet with community members, get input, already make adjustments based upon that.
It has
So,
to be collaborative. It has to be good for everybody.
Yeah. I wish you luck,
Thank you.
but we're not going to make it easy.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, then we're going to move into other new business, ordinance 22-15. Nobody can leave. No, you got to sit and listen to these. Sit down, Rick. We got a parking ordinance. I'm just kidding, Mr. Nelson, go home. All right, it's ordinance 22-15, prohibiting parking on a portion of Barnick Street. First reading. Rob.
Okay, this comes as a recommendation from the Traffic Safety Committee on Barnick Road. Barnick Road is the only the only accessible entrance to the Sauk Creek Nature Preserve that's pedestrian friendly, at least in that area. And so currently the situation on this small section of this dead end street is that a number of cars are essentially nearly permanent fixtures there, 3 across the road. Traffic safety believe that we could improve the visibility of this entrance as the Sauk Creek Nature Preserve by prohibiting parking in just that very small space between the dead end street and the first driveway on either side of the road. I have a aerial photo that shows what is usually kind of the status quo down there. This is a first reading of this ordinance. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer it.
I do have one question, Rob, and that is when we put up the sign for the no parking there, I noticed when I drove by the other day, a resident seems to have monopolized that with cars, boats, campers, trucks, trailers, all kinds of stuff. Are we going to line that as well to push out where the no parking is so that we see those kind of striped lines across there just to ensure that it's visible and that's not just a sign? I mean, is that something we could consider?
Sure, absolutely.
My daughter needs service hours for Port Washington, so I could have her do it if it's a problem. Any other questions or concerns about the ordinance first reading on prohibiting parking? None? Okay. Moving into 10C.
Mr. Mayor, one quick
I'm
one.
sorry, Mr. Benning.
Rob, have you discussed this with the impacted neighbors?
I have not.
Have they gotten a letter or anything?
No, they have not.
Are we going to? Do we normally, or?
Normally we do not.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it is assumed that they would prefer to keep the status quo, which is 3 vehicles parked across.
Yeah, I would suggest we give them a heads up that it's going to change and
Captain Dave, we got to keep one door open. It's a public meeting, sorry.
kick
them out.
Give them a heads up that it's changing so that, We don't have to send police down there and ticket them right away without them knowing it changed.
Okay.
That was thoughtful. All right, ordinance 2216, prohibiting parking on portions of North Park Street. First reading.
Yep. So this proposal is coming from one of the business owners in the area who owns Grand Avenue Saloon on the the northeast corner of that intersection of Park Street and Grand Avenue. He relayed to our committee that many years ago there was parking allowed on both sides of Park Street. With the reconstruction of North Park Street, which did not change the width of the street, he felt that in the evening hours that the street was lightly used and could benefit from parking on both sides of the street. Traffic Safety Committee agreed with that assessment and is recommending that after 6 p.m. on a daily basis that both sides of the street be open for parking, and that would, so on the east side of the street, you can already park all the way essentially from Grand Avenue to the top of the hill. This would, on the west side of the street, what we're proposing is essentially from the start of the turn lanes to the top of the hill. So not quite the entire east side, the entire west side of the street, but the essentially the straight portion of the street, again, from the top of the hill to Grand Avenue. That makes sense. I have in the attachment I show in yellow highlighted where parking would be allowed on both sides of the street. And then there's still that section where parking is allowed on the east side of the street all the way to Grand. So again, on the east side, parking's allowed all the time. On the west side, it would just be essentially after 6 p.m.
So Rob, just a quick clarification. It says this change is to prohibit parking, or are we allowing parking in areas that is prohibited currently?
I'm looking at Rick because he wrote the ordinance.
Yeah, I can respond to that.
Sure, you could probably do a better job than I could. I mean, I could explain it, but Rick will do a better job.
Yeah. So currently, the no parking ordinance says there's no parking on the west side of North Park Street, all the way from the west curb line of Moore Road south to Grand Avenue. So that whole run up the hill and to Grand Avenue, parking is prohibited. So by amending that to limit the no parking area, you are, in effect, by operation of law, allowing parking further south on the west side of North Park Street. So the effect of the proposed amendment is to take a prohibited run of parking and allow parking at least on part of it.
So the prohibition permits parking in the prohibited area, further prohibiting the permission to permit it as we move forward.
See, the mayor
I'm
gets
just joking.
Yeah, and I guess
So we're going to permit parking in the area, but prohibit in the other.
So is this an amendment to the ordinance? Because it
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
2216 is amendment to the existing ordinance.
The amendment is to Section 170 of the no parking ordinance that prohibits all parking on the west side of North Park Street. And by amending it, you're only prohibiting parking on a portion of it, thereby allowing parking on the remainder. That's the best way I can say it. And I realize it's.
Does anyone at this point want to read the Abbott and Costello?
Yes, yes. The fact that it's Park Street doesn't help.
Yeah, I guess I'm just still not clear because it says ordinance 2022-16. It doesn't say anything about amendment.
Yeah, the first section.
I'm in the memo, so that's why.
Okay. In the actual ordinance, Section 1 indicates that Section 170 is amended to read, and then it states the amendment. So it amends the existing blanket prohibition on parking on the west side of North Park Street to scale that back to prohibit parking on only a portion of North Park Street.
Clear as mud.
Let me give it a kick.
I mean, I know what the intention
there's no parking
is,
anywhere on.
Yeah.
So it's, yes, the ordinance is labeled prohibiting parking on portions of North Park Street. I guess, could you label it allowing parking on portions of the park?
There's no need to state it that way. The amendment.
So my request is, this is a first reading, so between now and the next council meeting, if you guys could just clean up the memo so it's clear what we're voting on and what's going to happen.
I think the other thing we'll do is we'll add a diagram that's maybe a little bit instructive visually.
Okay.
Ben, no good decisions are made this late at night. All right. Any other questions on the first reading? I mean, all in favor of having Ben at every council meeting? All right. Okay, let's move into the first reading then of ordinance 2022-17, an ordinance rezoning land in the city of Port Washington and amending the zoning map. This is the first reading. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The proposed rezoning ordinance follows the Common Council's action on May 17th of this year, in which you all approved, the developer's application for an overlay plan development, rezoning parcel of vacant land in the I-2 Industrial Park Zoning District. And the purpose of that is for a business park condominium development. And the ordinance reflects what city staff's understanding of the specific use requested by the applicant and approved by the council. It also includes a further condition that the requirement that the condominium documents created by the developer, which would be submitted for review and approval by staff, expressly set forth those limited uses and that those uses be made irrevocable and non-modifiable. The only other thing I would note is that in discussions amongst the city attorney and the developer's attorney as well, there is one modification, and you all received a copy of that by way of email and a paper copy. If you go to section number 2, or excuse me, page 2, section 2, under 1I, that language is struck, and instead there would be other uses as permitted in the I-2 Industrial Park Zoning District. So again, section 2I would be struck, and it would be other uses as permitted in the I-2 Industrial Park Zoning District. And in the one other modification is in section 2, number 2, last line of that paragraph, removing all and adding the. So the sentence would be, the provisions of this subsection 2 shall run with the property and shall be binding upon the property owners of each lot or condominium unit and their grantees, successors, and assignees.
Any questions? Mr. Benning?
My only request, Tony, is that we make sure we have the condominium agreements before second reading, if at all possible, to tie all this together. And I know it's not in your control, but as you work with a developer.
Yeah, it's not in our control, and the only other thing I would add is that between readings of the first and second, I believe there is a provision that it has to be, the second reading has to be within, and I'm going to look at the city attorney, 60 days.
5 weeks of the first
5
reading.
weeks. So that is something that we can convey to the developer, and it's up to them whether or not we meet that. Otherwise, what we'd have to do is come back with the rezoning ordinance as a first read again, if that 5-week period expires.
I would just request we keep it on the normal cadence, and then if it's there or not there, then we can make a decision at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. It's just a matter, it's not in our control to create those documents. And we can't get them at the city staff needs some time to review them, so.
Any other questions? Okay, we're going to wrap up then. Any other public comments or appearances for this evening? Yes, same rules apply.
I have one question.
Nope, I'm sorry, Pat, you got to step to the microphone so the public can hear who is watching on TV.
1 second. When is the November hearing at the Planning Commission?
17th of November, thank you. 6
Yeah.
o'clock.
6 o'clock?
Yep.
That's all I wanted to know. Thank you very much.
Go ahead. Question about your graffiti, going back at the beginning. the owners of the houses or businesses would be responsible for removing it. What happens if it's racist graffiti?
Yeah, it's a great question. We can't answer. What I'll ask is Mr. Brown reaches out to you tomorrow and walks you through the answer to your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I think, in other words, I think there probably should be some kind of an exception in that particular case.
Okay, excellent. Emily, would you just grab his phone number for Mr. Brown when you get a chance? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lucy Sheff. I live on East James. I just had a question when she was bringing up her proposal, and it's everything that everybody had brought up already. That were against it. I kind of agree with that. But the question I don't understand is, when she did Mequon, she took a big area of land that had few industrial buildings on it, and then she vacated the back part and put condos way in the back where it was just vacant land, and then she developed the few buildings that were remaining there to make this nice big complex. And it's beautiful. It's on a boulevard. People can go 40, 45 miles an hour and get to where they want to go to do things there. Port Washington is so little, in that little square, people want to see the lake. So if you make a square across that main street, it's just going to congest the whole area. I don't understand is I don't know who owns the area across the strip mall between here and Saukville. And then there's that one big tall brick building that is way to the west. And then there's the clinic. You have all that vacant land that could be a tie that if she made a beautiful concept, whatever, she does great work. I love her work. But it's too much for downtown Port. It's just too much. If she would tie Saukville with Port Washington, put an ice skating rink there, have a square there, have businesses there that can come off the expressway, get back on the expressway. But in this area, it's just too congested. People want to see the lake. That's why we're here, so that's the only thing. I don't know. I thought there was a soccer field at one time when I was here that they were talking about building soccer fields out there. So I don't know if the city owns that land or who owns that land, but I think that would be an excellent area to build a decent, she does beautiful work. And you wouldn't have to tear anything down. The big thing would be the sewer and water or something that you would need to do. So that would be my concept.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Sorry about that. Do I need to reintroduce myself for the record? Paul Schiller, 277 Nautica Drive. Thank you. I felt the need to make additional comments since my name was utilized by the developer. And I tell you, it was a pretty frustrating experience listening to that because I saw a lot of selective facts. She pointed out the 24-foot height on the corner of Milwaukee and Washington. I don't believe pointed out the 58-foot height at the corner of Wisconsin and Washington, or the 58-foot height at the corner of Grand and Milwaukee. I don't necessarily appreciate the reference to myself and to John Reichert because it really is about the negative aspects, and the fact that we're meeting doesn't mean that I condone in any way the development ideas. And I don't know if there was a strategy there, but when you come in from kind of crazy town with a 90-foot tower, and then you move it down to 58 and then think you've given a lot, that's a little bit manipulative in my view too. I also think a lot of the image looking down at this wonderful complex was from the roof of a building. That park if you go on the park, well, the park won't even be there. But if you go on that corner, all you're going to see is a building. All you're going to see from John Reichert's house is a building. You're not going to see the community, and the community's not going to be embraced by all of that. I also think saying activating a lot and saying activate, I was suggesting we play a drinking game, but we would have all been plowed by now. Just saying activate does not make it happen. There's a big difference between that and the reality of getting the community involved in a space. So I appreciate the extra opportunity to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schiller.
You pronounced that right.
Yeah, well, you might also be the first citizen to ever use the word getting plowed at a council meeting, so I also appreciate that.
I used something earlier today that might have been the first time too.
Any other public comments?
Shane Schmelzer. One interesting tidbit. If you guys look on the original plat for the city from 1847, and I'm not throwing any weight behind this project. It's my first time hearing a whole lot about it, but the actual original plat for the city had a city square up. Actually, I think where the police department is right now. So it's just kind of funny that this whole thing's coming up now in the same general area. But one other thought is parking. I know parking's been discussed, but it's definitely, I think, one of the biggest things for the city. And the closer to downtown they can get parking, the better. And I know there's a lot of small towns, well, I shouldn't say a lot. I'm familiar with some smaller towns that have put in multi-level parking. If you can go below ground, above ground, whatever, try to keep the height low. But parking is definitely one of the bigger, I think, restrictions for this town. So that's all.
Any other public comments or appearances?
Hi, my name is Christine Lejeune. I live at 137 East Cleveland Street here in Port. And I just wanted to actually voice my support for the mayor's comment about the library. I believe it's a really beautiful structure when I first saw it. It's an exemplary, almost Frank Lloyd Wrightian kind of piece of mid-century modern architecture. And I would hope that we would preserve it instead of, I also went to all three of the developers meetings. And at one point I did ask about the library and land ownership. And she had said that the library would be somewhat of a condo within her building if it were in there, which raises questions to me about then ownership and legal situations if the library at some point would ever need to expand further. And so I just wanted to voice my concern as well about the library maintaining in its current position. Also about the redundancy of some of her proposals, implying that Port Washington doesn't already have community spaces to gather. I think that she needs to do a lot more community research, reaching out to people who she's claiming will benefit from this, as far as people who work for local businesses. So I just feel that some of the language she used as well kind of shows that she didn't really do her on-the-ground research as far as reaching out to community and the people she's purporting to be serving.
Thank you. Be a cool bookstore right there. Any other public comments or appearances? Okay, seeing none. Ben, you get the last word here, bucko. I'm giving you a pass to Principal Sukawati tomorrow. Ben has my permission to be excused from first hour. He was up late serving his city. Mayor Knightsky. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.